Tom Petty was a rock and roll hero in the United States. He protected the real heart of rock and roll. Because he was so professional and honest, he once made everyone in the music business nervous. He didn't like flashy things and wouldn't use any marketing tricks, even if it meant losing millions of dollars. But because of that, he was also very mean to people who used the guitar to show off their professional skills. Petty thought that many people who were called heroes were really just stage magicians. The following 6 names made him so mad that he called them an insult to rock and roll, especially the third one. First place goes to Eddie Van Halen. The first thing on the list could be the most shocking fact. Tom Petty was so angry at Eddie Van Halen that he couldn't hide it. He thought Eddie wasn't just wrong, he had betrayed the whole idea of music. When the story goes back in time, it shows a surprising beginning to the fight between the two heroes. Van Halen's first record was played for the first time in the Heartbreakers practice room in late 1978. Tom Campbell sat next to Mike Campbell and listened to some scorching tapping notes. Tom winced a little and asked a cold question without saying a word. He plays a lot of notes fast. But can he play one that anyone will notice? All of a sudden, there was silence. After that, Eddie seemed to become a sign of dislike in Petty's eyes. Technique has taken the place of artistry, and flashy skills have made feeling less important. Members of the tour remembered that Tom would ask to move the backstage room if Van Halen was playing close at festivals in the early 1980s. He even took the monitor speaker out of the loop one time because he didn't want Eddie to be heard through the amp. It was a harsh rejection of Eddie's whole style when he told Stan Lynch, all that technique and not one song about an odd. Is your thing real? What's the point? Tom felt his anger grow even stronger as Van Halen became a worldwide rock star. Eddie, who is known for being nice, once went up to Tom at a radio event and asked, "Hey man, what kind of pickups do you use on that Rickenbacker?" Petty laughed it off though. "I'd rather write songs that people remember than solos that other musicians think are great." He didn't try to be polite. He said things that showed he didn't like them. The pianist for the band Heartbreakers, Benmont Tench, told what Petty would often say when someone wanted to play a flashy solo. "Do not Van Halen this. You've already missed the point if you're just playing to show off." Not because Eddie wasn't good, but because he was everything Petty wanted to avoid. He saw Eddie as the ideal to avoid. In a harsh but unwavering statement, Petty once told producer Jimmy Iovine, "They're turning the guitar into a talent show trick. Next thing you know, kids are going to think speed is the same with feeling." Eddie didn't hit back hard, but he also didn't say nothing. Eddie said to Guitar Player in 1995, "There's a difference between not liking something and being bitter about being left behind." When Petty's name comes up, Eddie said, "I don't know the guy, but I'd rather move the instrument forward than guard a museum." He chose progress over keeping old molds, which was a proud statement of innovation. Even into the 1990s, the stress stayed high. Once a fan asked for Panama on Croc. Tom stopped the song in the middle and said, "We've already had our daily recommended dose of finger tapping and spandex for the decade." He didn't name anyone, but it was clear that the comment was meant to poke fun at Eddie and the Van Halen style he didn't like. The last few years of Tom's life made him kinder. According to an interview with Rolling Stone in 2014, he said, "Hate is a strong word. Eddie did what he did better than anyone else. It just wasn't what I was trying to do. I've come to peace with that." When asked if he'd ever want to work with Eddie, he just laughed. "Probably not, but I'd send flowers if he asked." None of them shook hands or softened their stance because Tom had died in 2017 and Eddie had died in October 2020. When Eddie died, his ex-wife Valerie Bertinelli told everyone that he thought Tom was funny, even though he didn't get him. A short sentence that caused a lot of complicated feelings ranging from anger to secret admiration. The feud was just a deep, unbridgeable difference in the end. It wasn't always hate. Second, a Slash. Everyone thought at first that Tom Petty had nothing against Slash. They weren't from the same age, they never worked together, and neither of them got caught in a scandal with the other. But the coldness they showed each other at award shows, the silence between them, and the whispers behind closed doors told a different story. It was a story that everyone in the rock world knew about, but they never said it out loud. Tom Petty didn't like Slash and thought less of him. Petty believed in a style of music that didn't need any extra. As every lyric in rock and roll was written with blood, pain, and years of traveling, numerous people saw Slash as a sign of that freedom. Black top hat, cigarette on his lips, and a body part that doesn't look like Paul's. But for Petty, it was all just a perfectly planned picture. Someone at a rehearsal said that Slash was one of the last real guitarists who still had rock's soul. Petty looked up, gave a half smile, and said, "The hat, the cigarette, the Les Paul, it's a carefully constructed image. selling the idea of authenticity without the lived experience behind it. He wasn't mad, just angry. For him, being honest through music meant not just looking like a hero, but also being brave enough to live like one. That anger never came out in public, but it spread quickly in the studio. When Guns N' Roses were at their best and Petty was still playing with the Heartbreakers, the two bands were often close to each other at big music events. When the Rolling Stones were shot at one night, Petty went back to his tour bus, looked at his drummer Stan Lynch straight in the eye, and said everything in a clear voice. Their game is to dress up as rock stars. We're still trying to play music. The stage crew heard the statement like wildfire, and soon after, it got to Slash. He did not respond. When asked, he simply said, "I never met Tom. Nobody's ever told me he said anything directly to my face." That attitude, indifferent but not oblivious, made many believe Slash knew he wasn't liked by Petty and didn't try to change that. Petty once shared during a recording session that what annoyed him most wasn't a bad artist, but one pretending to be real. When Slash stepped on stage, he felt like he was watching an actor playing a rocker, not someone putting their life into the music. In a conversation with photographer Mark Seliger, he dropped a quote still repeated backstage on tour today. "We actually lived through the 60s and 70s. These guys are wearing the uniform without serving in the trenches. No one really knows if Slash actually never served in the trenches. But to Petty, experience was what made an artist, not the costume." He didn't hate Slash for his guitar technique. He hated what Slash represented, a generation lifted by image instead of genuine struggle. One time at an award show, Slash walked past the backstage area where Petty was talking with friends. The two nearly brushed shoulders. They didn't look at each other, didn't shake hands, didn't smile. No one said a word, but the air in the room tightened as if someone had lit a flame inside a sealed box. One staff member recalled, "It was like watching two men speak with silence, and the silence was louder than any guitar riff." As time passed, Petty never publicly mentioned Slash in major interviews. He was smart enough not to turn their differences into tabloid drama. But whenever someone asked him about contemporary guitar heroes, he would dodge the question or switch the topic to Muddy Waters, George Harrison, or Mike Campbell, the man he believed was a guitarist who doesn't need a cowboy hat to be respected. And maybe that was true. Slash and Petty, two people who never really collided, may have remained silent. But that very silence said it all. A beautiful fracture in the history of rock and roll. Number 3. The Edge. As soon as we get to the third name on the list of musicians Tom Petty hated most, we take a surprising turn. Tom Petty despised the Edge, not out of jealousy, but because he represented a kind of music that Petty saw as a deep betrayal, the triumph of technology over talent. It all started in 1987 when Petty first listened to the Joshua Tree album, where the Edge's guitar sound filled the space with delay, echo, and layers of non-stop effects. He sat in silence, listening over and over again, then finally made a comment that many recounted through Stan Lynch. "This isn't guitar playing, it's sound design. He's making limited ability sound innovative through technology." To Petty, this wasn't simply art, it was deception, using equipment to blur personal limitations. From then on, the Edge became a cautionary example in Petty's studio. When he heard a demo that leaned too heavily on effects, he would remind everyone, "Effects should enhance what you're playing, not replace what you're not playing." He didn't say his name, but everyone on the team knew he was talking about the Edge, who hid behind his pedal board to hide how bad he really was. The tension between the two grew backstage at music events, where they had a vision clash. For example, Petty is said to have said, "Mike gets his sound from his fingers," while Edge was talking to Mike Campbell about guitar tone. "Where do you get yours again?" "Best Buy." It was a cold, icy jab that suggested Edge relied too much on his gear and not enough on his feelings and real skills. Petty wasn't just worried about how Edge played. What it was about was how he spoke. When they saw each other at music events, there was always a strong vibe between them. Someone remembered that Petty stood near the stage at an awards show while Edge talked to an assistant. For a split second, there was quiet as their eyes met. There was no handshake or second look. There was just a chill in the air, like a guitar string had been smashed to pieces. Edge did not give a clear answer. Edge only talked about the person who didn't like his style directly when he said, "Nobody ever told me he said anything to my face." He didn't want to make things more complicated. He kept playing his guitar with a lot of delay, making sounds that sounded like galaxies and waves breaking. But Petty thought it sounded more like music for a magic show than real feeling. That argument never turned into a public fight. Most of it happened in quiet times, behind the scenes, and with quiet comments and looks. Even when reporters pushed Petty, he wouldn't talk about Edge. In an interview in 2014, he said, "Innovation used to mean playing something no one had played before, not buying something no one had bought before." Even though he didn't know her. Me Edge, that line was like a war cry. The player, not the wallet and a pedal board, should be the one to come up with new ideas. In the last few years of his life, Tom Petty spoke out more about what he saw as the fakeness in current rock. He told them that he admired artists who used effects in a good way, but he thought that many of them were hiding their lack of skill behind light shows rather than honoring the spirit of the guitar. Fans were even more sure that there was an artistic line between Petty and the Edge that could never be crossed. In 2017, Petty died. The Edge still lives a quiet life, plays his guitar with a lot of delay, and shines with U2. There wasn't a final handshake, and neither said anything afterward. But something wasn't right. Some years later, at a U2 show, the Edge played an intro that sounded like the melody of Free Fallin'. He then switched to a long solo of his own. Even though it wasn't said out loud, many people thought it was a quiet nod to the man who once made fun of his style. The fourth person is Kirk Hammett. No one thought that Tom Petty, who is usually very calm, would think that Kirk Hammett, the famous Goose,